Hello and welcome back to Movie Recap Factory. Today we'll give you a recap of 2014 action crime movie titled Taken 3. Without further ado, let's get started. And spoilers ahead. The movie begins with two Russian men breaking into a house and taking a man away to a Russian mob boss called Oleg Malankov, who demands that that man opens the nearby safe. The safe is empty. Malankov calls someone, explaining that he has come to collect his debt. But since the money is not here, he will leave him something else. Malankov puts the man in the safe and kills him. We then see a man named Bryan Mills, who is at the store. He goes on to buy a giant panda bear for his daughter to give to her as a birthday present. A woman named Kim takes a pregnancy test, and as she sees the results, she has an intense expression on her face. Bryan gets there with that giant panda, and in the meantime, Kim's boyfriend named Jamie also gets there. Kim comments that Bryan is predictable, while Jamie says Kim is predictable as well, since she follows the same routine and goes to the convenience store to get the exact same orange smoothie drink from the exact same position. Bryan, however, leaves, and weirdly, he goes on to take the panda with him, and Kim does feel a little bad for behaving like that. As Bryan drives on, he calls his ex-wife, Lenore, and goes on to invite her to dinner, but she tells him she doesn't feel like it. The woman, however, goes on to surprise Bryan by showing up at his place while he's making dinner. She tells him that she's not very happy at home with her husband. She's so upset with her husband that she goes on to kiss Bryan, but Bryan stops her in the middle, saying she should take care of things with her husband and that this is not right at all. The next day, when Bryan is out playing golf with his friends, he receives a call from his daughter, who goes on to ask him to meet her. She prepares to tell him about her pregnancy when they see a bratty child making a fuss at another table. Well, she ends up asking him if she should buy a puppy or not. When Bryan goes home later that evening, Lenore's husband, Stuart, comes to see Bryan, and he tells him that he thinks Bryan and Lenore are sleeping together. Bryan goes on to make it abundantly clear to him that they are not sleeping together, and after that, Stuart tells him to stop hanging out with her as well. Bryan deals with him nicely, telling him that he understands where the man is coming from, but he can assure him that there is nothing going on between them. Bryan gets a text from Lenny, asking him to meet her at his apartment for some bagels. Bryan gets the bagels and returns to find a bloody knife on the floor. The man makes the mistake of picking up the knife, and when he goes inside, he sees Lenore dead and her throat has been slashed. As he tries to check in on her, two policemen show up and try to handcuff him, but he goes on to beat the shit out of them and gets out of there when he hears that more are approaching. They chase him through the streets until he runs into a garage and escapes through a hatch door into the river and out to the basin. Bryan calls Kim from a payphone while she is at Lenny's place looking for a sweater. He breaks the news to Kim about her mother's murder and that he is being framed. He tells her to stay safe. Kim is shocked to hear the tragic news and sits down trying to process what just happened. The police arrive at the crime scene again. They now go on to investigate everything around the place where the dead body has been found. They also take a look at Stuart and Lenore's place. Stuart returns immediately from a business trip. He is brought in to identify Lenore's body at the morgue. He breaks down and tells Dotzler about Bryan's past. After they leave, Bryan also manages to sneak into the place where they have kept Lenore's body. He is sad to see her. He brushes her forehead gently and leaves after taking a hair as a sample. Bryan now goes on to start his own investigation. He tracks the car's GPS and sees that she made a visit to the gas station just before she died. He goes to the gas station and sneaks into the security room to see the footage from the surveillance cameras. He sees Lenore being snatched by a masked man and thrown into a van. One of the men has a star-like tattoo on his hand. Two detectives stop at the same gas station and learn that Bryan was there. They find him in the security room and arrest him. Bryan doesn't fight this time. They let their superior know that they have arrested Bryan, but the man right away understands that they are being played by him. This is when he goes on to uncuff himself and knocks two police officers out of the car and tells the driver to keep driving. He then takes control of the vehicle himself. Bryan, being chased by the police, goes into a garage where his vehicle ends up falling down an elevator shaft. However, Bryan manages to get out in time before the car explodes. The inspector, named Dotzler, speaks to Bryan on the phone and tells him to give himself in to the police, saying they're going to catch him anyway as everyone is going to be looking for him now. Bryan then goes to see a friend. He gives him the sample he took and goes on to tell him the whole story. Lenore's funeral takes place, with everyone going to console Kim and Stuart. Sam goes over to Kim and tells her to follow her predictable schedule. He motions to the button on his lapel, which is a hidden camera. Kim knows her dad is watching and she smiles. The detectives now start following Kim wherever she goes. She goes on to do as her father has asked, just doing the predictable schedule. She goes to the store to get her regular drink and comes across a note there, and the note says, "Drink me now." She drinks it and makes her way to the school, but she feels unwell during the class. She makes her way to the bathroom and Bryan meets her there. He then gives her a dose of something that is going to make her feel better, as he puts something in her drink to make her come to the bathroom. Bryan tells her that he is going to find the real killers of her mother, and Kim also goes on to tell him about the pregnancy. The detectives show up at the school, but they are too late as the man has already hit the road. While he is driving though, he is followed by some Russian gangsters. They hit his car, the car crashes and even explodes, but Bryan manages to escape yet again. One of the goons can be heard saying he needs a drink, so Bryan takes a car from the man at gunpoint and makes his way to the liquor store. Bryan goes on to beat the shit out of all the goons, but there is no one left. A shootout begins between the two, and this man has a tattoo on his hand. Bryan then manages to catch him and tortures him, trying to ask who sent him, but he doesn't say anything and goes on to put Bryan's gun into his mouth and pulls the trigger. Bryan locates Stewart, who retreated to a beach house. He knows Stewart sent the thugs, and Bryan takes Stewart to another area and waterboards him for information. He goes on to add that they killed his wife because he was unable to pay the money to Malankov in time. He adds that this man is dangerous as he is a trained assassin and he also has served in the military. Bryan then goes on to take Stewart to where everyone is present. Kim and Sam are also there when Bryan asks Stewart to set up a meeting with the man. They decide the place of the meeting and Bryan makes his way to the building. As Bryan walks on, he kills everyone that comes his way before he finally gets to the man himself, who has a gun in his hand and starts shooting. The two fight each other, with Malankov nearly shooting Bryan until Bryan takes the gun from him and shoots him twice. Bryan approaches Malankov to deliver the final shot until Malankov says they were played by the same man, and that is Stewart. Mortally wounded Malankov reveals that Stewart planned Lenore's murder and framed Bryan as part of a business deal to collect $12 million life insurance policy. Malankov adds that when Stewart failed to kill Bryan, he used Bryan to try and kill Malankov so Stewart could keep the insurance money. On the other hand, Kim goes on to receive a message about a planned meeting in Sam's van. She goes on to talk to get connected to her father, but before the two are able to talk, Stewart realizes what is going on and he goes on to shoot Sam and calls his helicopter to arrive. Stewart also goes on to abduct Kim, intending to flee with the money. Under police pursuit, Bryan goes on to track his daughter and Stewart, and he realizes that they're heading for the airport. He then arrives at the airport in Malankov's Porsche as Stewart's private plane is preparing for takeoff. After destroying the landing gear with the Porsche, Bryan overpowers Stewart. He goes on to beat the shit out of him, and when he is about to finish him off, he looks at his daughter, who shakes her head negatively. Bryan refrains from killing Stewart, but warns him to expect retribution if he escapes justice or receives a reduced prison sentence. Dotzler and the LAPD arrive and arrest Stewart, while Bryan is cleared. And with that, the movie comes to an end. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below, and do subscribe to our channel to view more of our amazing movie recaps. And hit that bell icon to receive instant notifications from our side. See you all next time.